There you go.
Hi, everyone. Thanks
Hey.
for having me.
Welcome, Clark. How's it going?
It's good. It's good. I'm super excited to be here on air at reInvent. It's a privilege, and thanks for having me.
Yeah, please tell the people about yourself before we jump into this really exciting syncing
Yeah,
with.
so I'm a technical product manager on infrastructure as code. So I work on this feature. I worked on this feature, some Git features specifically around AWS. Also have done some other work in validations for CloudFormation deployments.
Nice. So before we jump into, maybe we should give people. So you already mentioned one of the terms right there.
Yep.
Infrastructure as code. One of my favorite things in the past decade or so to come out. But you want to give people just kind of an overview. What is infrastructure of code if they've never heard of it or used it before we jump
Yeah,
into this
so
announcement?
exactly. They're configuration files, essentially. So it's a way of you persisting the configuration of your application, your server, really any AWS resources can be represented in CloudFormation. Another very popular infrastructure as code that I'm sure most people here have heard of, Terraform. But I'll be talking about a specific feature for CloudFormation today.
Very nice. Yeah, it's I mean, for people like me, it's a godsend for being able to track the infrastructure just like you
Exactly.
track your code assets, right? Because we
Yeah.
already have processes all set up to track code assets. We've been using Git for feels like centuries now. I don't know how long, but a long time we've been using Git. So that's kind of what we're here to talk about today, right? With syncing directly from Git.
Yeah, so and exactly as we were just talking about, one of the huge advantages of all infrastructure as code is that they can easily be stored in a Git file. So I'm sure anyone here who uses IAC infrastructure as code probably already stores your Terraform, CloudFormation, or your CDK in a Git repository, probably on GitHub, Bitbucket, GitLab, or if you have some sort of in-house solution for storing Git files, you're probably already doing that. And a pattern that we've seen a lot of customers develop is having a CI/CD pipeline in which a new commit, so a new change on your infrastructure as code file, will trigger a deployment behind the scenes. So ideally, you as a developer, you're on your keyboard, you're making a change to your Terraform, your CloudFormation file, your CDK. You want to add a new attribute to your S3 bucket. You commit that, and then you don't have to worry about anything else. Behind the scenes, a deployment will have been kicked off because of a new Git commit that you just pushed up. And that's a pretty common pattern that we've seen a lot of customers do. Um, there's some manual work that you may have to do to set that up. Some more sophisticated customers may already have a complete pipeline built around this with validation checks and everything. But we at Information wanted to give customers a very simple, fast, easy way to get this up and running themselves. And that's totally managed by AWS. So you don't have to maintain a separate pipeline if you so choose, if you just want to use this one feature. Cool.
We got some CloudFormation jokes coming in from chat, by the way, Clark. I don't know if you'll appreciate this or not. I hope you do.
I always
Why don't
appreciate a good joke.
why don't CloudFormation templates ever argue? Because they always agree on the stack. There you go.
Awesome. Yeah, so I have this little demo
Oh,
pre-recorded.
nice. We
So
love demos.
yeah, why don't we get started? Okay, so this is your classic CloudFormation console, and so I just went to create a new stack, and this is kind of where the rubber meets the road here. Before we just had these two options for um, for specifying a template and creating a new stack. It was either using an S3 bucket, so storing your CloudFormation template and on S3, or uploading it locally. Of course, you can also do this with the CLI. But now I really want to, what I'm excited about here is this third option, sync from Git. We've even designated new in the console just so to draw some attention to it for this reInvent launch. We're really excited about. So I'll go ahead and I'll sort of kick through this getting started process from syncing from Git. So click on that. And now I'll go through the process of setting this up, creating that first connection. So I want to specify the stack name here. This is sort of what you would do normally if you were creating a new stack in the console.
Clark, I don't, and I may be jumping ahead here. Sorry.
Mhm.
In that actual Git repo that you're going to be, can you have a mixture, or is it just a dedicated Git repo just for the like YAML or JSON file for this CloudFormation template?
Yeah, so I should have said one of the prerequisites, and I'll get to that in a second, but one of the
Okay.
prerequisites for this already have your template stored in a Git repository. So you
But
want
can I mix it in with other, like, so can I have my code living alongside the
you can have your
JSON file?
code, yep, for
Okay.
sure. You can put whatever you want in that repository. We sort of recommend as a practice to separate your application code from your infrastructure code. So you
Makes
can do
sense.
whatever you'd like, but I would imagine that you would have uh, and we'll see the one that I've set up is a repository with all your CloudFormation templates stored in there, along with the configuration file, which I'll get to in 1 second. We can talk about that right now, actually, the configuration file.
Cool.
So something new we're bringing to this feature is this stack deployment file. So this is something we've been hearing from customers a lot is that they want a place to persist their parameters and tags for a stack, right? So before today, if you had parameters in a CloudFormation stack, so those would be fed into the template and then displayed within displayed within your stack, exposed within your stack. You would just that would be through the console or the CLI. But now we have a file that's that has a Git history on it, a Git file with your tags and your parameters as well. So you can keep track of those. And then this feature will listen for both updates to your template for new commits and updates to that configuration file. So let's say you want to add a new tag, you want to change this tag to be production from a staging branch, from a staging tag, you can do that within GitHub, and then we'll update your stack and deploy it and monitor for that. So you have two options here for that configuration file. One, just like your template, you can store that in GitHub and already have that placed in GitHub for you that you've done before this. But we have this other option where we can actually create that, AWS can create that file on your behalf and then put it in your same repository as a pull request. So we'll show you what that flow looks like in a second. But I want to I want to use a console to create that file. And then here is where we're actually connecting to your repository of choice. So as you can see, we support GitHub, GitHub Enterprise, which is Microsoft's GitHub's enterprise option, GitLab, and Bitbucket. So those are some of the more popular repository hosts. And then you under the hood, we're using CodeStar connections, which is a separate AWS services APIs to make this connection. So if you're going through the CLI, which we have instructions and documentation for, you would be using a CodeStar connection API to create this connection. Okay, and so now I set up, before this, I set up my connection already before this demo. So this is the repository that my template is going to live in and that I want to sync from. And now I want to choose the branch. So I'm just going to have a main production branch. But as you can imagine, if you were to test this out, you could create a sync that syncs from a staging branch and a separate one that syncs from a production branch. So you could merge things into a production to a staging branch, see that deployment happen to your CloudFormation stack, make sure everything's okay, and then once that looks all right, you could merge that, create another PR, and merge that into your main production branch and see that deployment. And here I'm just putting the file, the path that my configuration deployment file that I want AWS to create. I'm just going to use the root here of the directory, but you could have a you could have a subfolder in your repository with all your configurations and all your templates as well. And then here we do need a role to run this sync on an ongoing basis. But we have a feature in the console that'll actually create the role on your behalf. So I'm going to use that to simplify it. We also have the permissions, so you can manually create it as well. And then here in my deployment configuration file, I need to let I need to let CloudFormation know where my actual template to sync from is. So I don't remember off the top of my head what it's called or where it is. So I'm just going to go to my GitHub repo and I'm going to find the template I want, copy and paste it, and then put that into here. And so that will be the template that we track from now on. And here
But
I
can I ask?
Yeah.
Could you have multiple stacks pointing to the same repo, just with pointing to a different file in that repo?
Yes, you can. You can also have multiple stacks pointed to the exact same file.
Oh, wow. Interesting.
Yeah.
Cool.
So if you want, you could do cross-region deployments this way. So you could have one stack in one region pointed to the same file, and then you can have as many regions as you want, and then deploy. And then once you update that file, it'll kick off deployments in multiple regions.
You've got a feature request, by the way, in chat for code commit support. I'll drop that in there.
Absolutely, absolutely. That is something that we're looking into, and we've gotten that feedback. Thank you. Okay.
Mark, you also mentioned that, designating who gets access to this or setting the user. Someone said possibly a dedicated IAM role.
Yeah. So there is a dedicated IAM role to keep this configuration sync going. And so that's what you have over here is we're creating that role for you. If you already have that role set up, and we provide for you all the permissions you need, you can just select it from a drop down rather than creating a new role every time you want to create this sync config. Okay, so I decided not to include any parameters in this configuration file because it's a very simple template that I'm using. It just has a wait condition. But I do want to add tags. I want to let people know that this environment is production. So I'm going to add this tag, a production tag here. And now I'm going to move on with the setup process. And then right here is just, you have to provide another role. This is the role that will actually do the deployment. So this, you probably already have, if you've ever used CloudFormation deployments before, you probably already have an existing role. So I've done that. I'm just going to pick my CFN admin role for this. And then what I want to show you here is this is a preview of what your actual configuration file will look like. So in a minute, once I hit submit, what will happen behind the scenes is the console will create a blank stack that just has a wait condition in it, and then it's waiting for you to merge in this configuration file on GitHub. And then if you're using the CLI, which we show, you have to create a blank stack and then create this configuration file from GitHub as well. So I just wanted to quickly point that out. We're not actually creating a new stack here. We're creating a blank stack that then will be updated from Git. Okay, so I'm now going to submit it. Now I'm going to go to GitHub, and here's where I should see that pull request for that configuration file that we just created in the console. So it's not going to be instantaneous. It may take like 10, 30 seconds to show up, but I see it here now. So let's take a look at this pull request. So this was generated from AWS. So we have some documentation here and some instructions for the developers to know what will happen exactly when you merge this into production. Sorry, merge this into your branch. Will then kick off an update to your stack. So here, this is what we saw in the preview. I don't have any parameters, but I do have a tag indicating that this is production. And then I have a line saying which template will be updated. So let's go ahead and merge this in. And now let's go back to the console so we can see the deployment actually happen. So here's our new tab in the CloudFormation console page. It's available right now for anyone to look at. And then we have two statuses that I would like to point out for everyone here. So we have the repository sync status and then the provisioning status. So the sync status is just letting you know that, hey, I just detected a change on GitHub or Bitbucket, and I'm going to pull in that information. So the syncing happens fairly quickly, which you'll see. And then the provisioning status is think the actual CloudFormation deployment. It's your stack event. It's the deployment of the stack. And so that could take longer. That could take however long it normally takes to deploy your stack based off of what you have in GitHub. So as you can see, the deployment actually hasn't happened yet. The sync is still ongoing. Let's go back and check on the sync status in a second to make sure that it's currently synced. So I'm going to refresh, and now we can see that it's successfully synced, but provisioning is still deployment. And so what we do is still happening. And so what we're doing here behind the scenes is we're just creating a change set and then executing it, and then the deployment is happening at that point. So let's see here. We can actually see the deployment is now happening in information. and it just completed. Awesome. So we just did our first setup of a successful deployment from Git. But I just now want to show you what it looks like on an ongoing basis. So let's say I want to change the stack in the future using Git. So I just did the initial setup. I now want to update the template that this feature is currently pointed at. So it's listening for any updates to this template, and then it will kick off a deployment once it detects a new commit. So here I have a very simple PR pull request to update that template. This was the original one. It just was essentially a blank stack with a wait condition. But now I want to use it to actually provision real infrastructure. I want to create an S3 bucket with my template. So I created this pull request to do this. And then let's go ahead and merge it in and see what happens. So here it is. I'm going to refresh it. And as you can see, the sync is now being initiated. The sync just completed, happened pretty instantaneously, but now we're actually provisioning that S3 bucket, and that could take a little bit longer. So let's just go ahead and take a look at that stack event to make sure that everything's deploying. As you can see, we're now executing a change set, and here we go. Here's the deployment that's happening right now. As you can see, our stack is being updated. We're doing a deployment, and the deployment was successful. We created this S3 bucket down here, and all we did was do it from Git. So I want to show you one final feature of this, which is very cool. It's using a native feature of GitHub, and we also support this for other providers too. But I'm just going to show you what it looks like on GitHub. So if I'm the developer and I just want to stay within Git and I don't even want to go to the AWS console, I can monitor the deployment status here. So like this is a feature of GitHub called Git Status Check. And it's actually running, you actually can track the deployment status here. So I just merged in a new PR to update my template. And then now I see it's complete, and I want to go actually look and just look at the status, make sure everything is okay on the console. So I can click through to that details, and it brings me right back to the stack that was just synced. So if I wanted to, I didn't have to leave GitHub at all. I could do everything. I could do everything within GitHub without going to the console.
It's like you anticipated what chat was thinking, because they just asked that question just a moment ago, and you led right into it. It's beautiful. One of the questions earlier, though, that I got asked was, can we talk a little bit about when I might utilize this new feature versus when I would go and deploy to CloudFormation from my CI/CD pipeline, right? When am I, do you have any suggestions for people to compare the two, right? Like if I have special kind of setup, special like configuration, maybe I need to do, maybe the CI/CD pipeline works. If I just have like pretty straightforward CloudFormation deployments, what do y'all think when you put this feature together? How do you compare the two? When do I pick a CI/CD pipeline versus this feature?
Right. So if you already have a advanced CI/CD pipeline set up with tons of validation checks, that's awesome. You should stick with that. But if you really want to start experimenting with Git deployments, if you want to get something off the ground really quickly, maybe if you have sort of one-off infrastructure deployments, this could be a great option. And a lot of people may say, hey, this is deploying without any tests or anything, and I have tests baked into my CI/CD pipeline. Well, you can actually, and we have a blog post on this, but you can actually set up tests very easily with GitHub Actions in GitHub. So if you create a PR, you can do any type of automated test on that PR, and you can set it up pretty easily. So you can't merge anything into your main production branch without it passing those tests first. And then you can also kick off test post deployment. So Git status check, that thing I just showed you earlier on GitHub, in which you can monitor the deployment from GitHub. That can also trigger tests as well upon completion.
Nice.
So you could,
you could build in a checkoff scan or a CFN nag scan pretty easily. Just
exactly.
the blog post in GitHub.
Yeah, the blog post we have from the CloudFormation developer advocate Dan walks you through how you can set it up using CFN lint as a
Cool.
checker on your PR.
Very cool. All right, Clark, we're almost out of time, right, Jasmine?
We are. It's our time. It's our
Yeah.
time. We've certainly enjoyed this demo, getting everyone to show them how they can sync CloudFormation resources with Git. But it's that time, Clark.
All right, awesome. Thank you so much for having me. Appreciate it.
Of course.
All right. We'll see you next time, Clark.
Bye.